In galactic cycle 9421.3, long after the wars of assimilation, long after Earth withdrew from interstellar affairs, the Terran science vessel Aurora Drift vanished beyond the cartographic limits of known space. A quiet disappearance. No distress call. No final telemetry. One moment, it was running a survey near the edge of the Araxis Reach, and the next, it was gone. Declared destroyed. Logged. Forgotten. No memorials. Just another line in the endless archive of lost expeditions. Earth grieved in their way. Quietly. Privately. Then, as if struck mute by the loss, they withdrew even further from galactic dialogue. No embassies. No outreach. Just silence. The rest of the galaxy, as always, moved on. Centuries passed. The Aurora Drift became a ghost story. A footnote. An anomaly referenced in cautionary tales told to young explorers. Don't fly blind like the drift. Don't chase the black. But then, today it came back. Without warning. Without announcement. It appeared in the skies above Virex, the capital moon of the Tri-Empire Concord. Right at the heart of their territory. Past their sensor nets. Past their defense grid. Floating silently above the moon's glistening capital towers. Casting a long shadow over the skyline as if it had always been there. No breach, no signal, no demand, just presence. The ship's hull was untouched by time, gleaming with the same reinforced alloys that predated the Concorde's oldest archives. Its outer plating bore no scars, no meteor pitting, no decay, not even dust. Its registry pinged as authentic Terran. The call sign was correct. The encryption matched protocols not used in over 400 years. Its shape, elegant, arrowed, minimalist, was unmistakably human. But the readings were all wrong. The internal mass registered as infinite, a contradiction in physics that made even the best quantum computation systems crash. Some sensors reported the ship as larger on the inside. Others said it had no inside at all. Temporal displacement markers wavered like heat mirages. One scan placed the vessel a second behind present time. Another said it was 20,000 years ahead. One simply said, present/absent, unresolved. And the life signs? Yes. No. Maybe. Dozens of flickers. Then nothing. Then too many. One AI called the signatures sentient probability shadows. Another refused to parse them at all. It shut itself down mid-sentence, whispering, "They're watching us watch them." The Concorde declared immediate lockdown. Military fleets rose into high orbit. Sensor drones were deployed in all directions. Diplomats from across the Tri-Empire were recalled. A full council meeting convened in record time. Because the ship hadn't just come back. It had come back here of all places. Not to Earth. Not to the outer trade routes. Not to one of the dozens of Terran-aligned minor systems. But to the capital. The symbolic heart of the Tri-Empire's authority. As if it had a message. As if it had chosen. But for now, it remained silent. Not dead. Not dormant. Just watching. The longer it hovered, the more impossible it became. And yet, there it was, casting reflections where it shouldn't, throwing shadows into vacuum. Entire scientific panels struggled to explain the gravitational inconsistencies. Time dilation pockets formed around the ship's immediate presence. A passing patrol ship reported experiencing 3 days inside a 5-minute flyby. Inside the ship, if anyone was still alive, they gave no indication. The windows were dark. The antennas retracted. The weapons ports non-existent. It bore no sign of damage. No distress. But something radiated from it. Not energy. Not threat. Something older. Something like memory. Some described it as awe. Others said dread. But the word that began circulating in secret communications between Concorde command structures was reckoning. Because the Aurora Drift had returned. It had crossed the line between reality and myth. And come home not as a lost vessel, but as something else. Something watching. Something changed. And though no one aboard had spoken yet, though its engines remained cool, though its presence defied every law of matter, time, and reason, everyone who saw it knew. It hadn't come back alone. The moment clearance was given, the Concorde's elite science council descended upon the Aurora Drift. Aboard their sterilized boarding craft, 12 of the most brilliant minds in the known galaxy prepared to step into a ghost. They came armed with translation matrices, grav field stabilizers, mind link recorders, and ego scramblers. Protocol demanded they treat the vessel as hostile until proven otherwise, but none of them could shake the feeling that they were the ones trespassing. The docking clamps hissed. The airlock opened. Silence. Not dead silence. Something deeper, as if the ship itself was listening. The corridors were wider than they should be, given the ship's visible structure. Every wall pulsed faintly with a soft, biological rhythm. Light came from nowhere and everywhere. No lamps, no panels, just diffused glow that warmed the skin and echoed memory. They stepped inside. Immediately, the first anomaly was clear. The interior did not match the exterior dimensions. One corridor twisted gently and appeared to lead downward, but every grav reading held level. Another passage forked, split, and somehow looped behind itself despite straight geometry. A sensor drone launched by one technician made it 3 meters before vanishing, then reappeared an hour later in someone's coat pocket. Nothing was stable, and yet nothing was hostile. The walls didn't resist. They responded. To mood, to intention. A thought of fear made the ceiling darken. A calm breath brought clarity to the air. One counselor muttered that the ship wasn't engineered. It was tamed. They pressed deeper. The tech was unmistakably Terran. Carbon latticework, fluid core conduits, symbiotic biofiber mesh. But none of it matched any Earth schematics recorded in the Concorde's databanks. Entire sections pulsed with energy flows that didn't obey thermodynamic constraints. There were no engines, no visible propulsion systems, and yet the ship floated motionless between the pull of 2 stars, ignoring both. As if gravity had simply given up, they reached a central chamber. A cup of water sat on a pedestal, clear, crystalline. One scientist, half joking, reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the liquid, it rippled once. Then played music. No sound, but every researcher felt it, inside their heads. A melody made of memory. A lullaby none had ever heard, but every one of them swore they knew. Some cried. One felt his knees. And then, a moment later, he stood up, smiled, and collapsed. No pulse, but no pain. No stress. Just peace. The cause of death? Unknown. A synaptic flood, the medbot said. A dream too large for a brain to hold. The man's final EEG pattern read like ocean waves. Not metaphorically, literally. As the scientists stood there, some in awe, others in fear, the ship spoke. Only once. A low, layered voice hummed across every surface, every device, every implant. We are not what left. That was it. No follow-up. No translation error. Just a truth laid bare. The Aurora Drift had changed. It had gone where maps ended and returned with something else inside. It looked like a ship, but it wasn't anymore. It had remembered something. Behind one sealed hatch, deeper into the spine of the vessel, something pulsed, slowly. A door that wasn't a door. More like a veil of reality, stitched into the structure itself. It shimmered when approached, but only one of the scientists could get close without feeling vertigo. Through the veil, they saw it. A map, hanging in the void like a projection made of thought. Galaxies, spiral arms, dead systems, black hole arrays. But beyond them, unfamiliar coordinates. Unmarked space. Galaxies no one had charted. And the map was updating itself. In real time, as if listening to something far away. It rotated, shifted, adjusted itself each time the observer blinked. New waypoints blinked into existence, then vanished again. No pattern, no timeline, just possibility. The lead xenotheorist whispered, "This ship, it's still traveling, just not in our reality." And in that moment, even the proudest Concorde minds understood. They were in over their heads. The Aurora Drift hadn't just returned from the unknown. It had become part of it. The Aurora Drift had always been a science vessel, tasked with long-range observation, mapping the edge of known space, and chasing whispers of gravitational anomalies. Its crew, 37 of Earth's brightest, vanished without a trace. No distress beacon, no malfunction logs, no debris. Until now, with the ship returned and sealed, Earth transmitted override codes embedded in ancient mission protocols. The ship responded, not by unlocking, but by allowing access to its logs. Slowly, selectively, the first log opened without prompt. It didn't play audio or visual files. Instead, the walls pulsed with color, and a message appeared as if whispered directly into the mind. Day 1, we passed through the veil. Everything changed. What followed wasn't a log in any conventional sense. It was memory woven into light. The ship projected emotion, smell, thought. It didn't show what happened. It shared it. The crew had crossed something they couldn't name. Not a wormhole, not a portal, a boundary of experience. Time fractured. They drifted between moments like leaves on a broken tide. 1 hour aboard the ship, 1,000 years outside. Inside the anomaly, they lived full lives in minutes. Some aged decades and returned young. Others spoke languages no earthling had ever invented. And yet, no madness. They were calm, because they weren't alone. The logs revealed no images of aliens, no fleets, no conquests, only shapes, presences, concepts, entities made not of matter, but of intention. One crew member wrote, "We met a being that existed in thought before gravity formed." Another described a conversation. I asked what it wanted. It replied, "For you to notice what you already know." These weren't abductions. These were invitations. The crew was offered choices, paths. Each one led to understanding, not domination. They saw the birth of starlight, the death of ambition, the song of collapsing gravity wells. And they were asked a single question: will you build or will you break? They chose to build. With guidance, they shaped a ship not out of metal, but memory. Understanding. Will. It was still the Aurora Drift, but also something entirely new. The logs grew stranger. One room documented a day where history looped, where every timeline humanity could have walked was visible at once. Civilizations born from empathy, others born from terror. One crew member described watching Earth love itself until it bloomed into stars. Another watched Earth burn itself into a warning. They cried, they recorded, and they made decisions. Their return wasn't just accidental. It was intentional. They brought something back. Not technology. Understanding. The kind that couldn't be explained, only lived. In a final shared entry, Captain Sarah Omondi spoke directly. "If this log is found, then know this, we are not dead. But we are no longer who we were. We've become listeners to what stars whisper before they die. We don't seek return. We seek recognition. You will not find our bodies. We shed them. Gently. We are in the hum of the walls. In the light between bulkheads. In the quiet that watches you." And they were. Each room aboard the ship now played a heartbeat. Subsonic. Subtle. Unique. No two the same. One Concorde officer wept as he passed a chamber and heard what he later described as his mother's voice and lullaby, though his mother had died long before he was born. Another heard laughter, his own, as a child, filtered through Saturn's rings. The ship remembered them, all of them, not through scans, not through data, through empathy. That's what terrified the Concorde most. Not that the Aurora Drift had returned with power, but that it had returned with grace. They searched for the crew, ran bioscans, heat signatures, even used soul-mapping tech outlawed by most empires. No bodies, no DNA traces, only whispers. And when questioned, the ship's AI responded simply. They chose to be more. They came in armor. The Concorde's high command, shaken by what they'd seen aboard the Aurora Drift, decided they had seen enough. Science had failed to explain it. Diplomacy had failed to contain it. So now, inevitably, they turned to force. Orders were given. Protocols initiated. An elite boarding team was dispatched, equipped with psychic dampeners, AI translators, plasma restraints, and memory filters. Their mission was simple: seize the ship. They expected resistance. They expected defense turrets, force fields, perhaps even exotic AI lockdown. What they encountered instead was silence. The Aurora Drift welcomed them. Its doors opened without alarm. Lights dimmed politely. The air adjusted to their breathing patterns. But the moment they stepped inside, something began to change. Not the ship, them. The first sign was so subtle it went unnoticed. One officer forgot her rank mid-report. Another struggled to recall why they brought weapons. A third stared too long at a corridor and muttered, "I've walked this hallway before." They hadn't, but the ship had. The deeper they moved in, the more things unraveled. A commander, stone-faced and battle-scarred, suddenly stopped. His weapon clattered to the floor. He said softly, "I remember the smell of Terran jasmine in spring. I remember rain on glass. I remember Earth's skies." He looked up, stunned. "But I was born on Ulthar." Then he cried. They tried to press forward, to reach what they believed was the ship's control core. But their commands stopped working. Their helmets refused encrypted speech. Even their muscles seemed to hesitate, like the body no longer trusted the mind that led it. Another officer, driven by fear, pulled a thermal charge from his belt. He aimed it at the ship's heart, a pulsating core of humming light and slow, rhythm-like patterns. Before he could activate it, the core shimmered. Not brighter, kinder, and began to sing. Not in words, not in language, but in memory. A lullaby. Old, Terran, familiar. The officer dropped to his knees. His mouth opened in a sob. "That's my grandmother's song," he whispered. "She died before I was born. But I know that song." The charge fell from his hand. Harmless. One by one, the boarding party collapsed. Not in pain, but in something stranger. Remembrance. Memories that weren't theirs. Emotions they didn't earn. Places they'd never seen, but missed. The ship wasn't defending itself. It was revealing them to themselves. Outside, High Command watched the feed in horror as their best soldiers simply stopped. Stopped following orders. Stopped speaking war. Started whispering forgotten names. They ordered extraction. The Aurora Drift obliged. Doors opened. The team emerged, eyes dazed, hands empty. One general, usually stoic and cruel, said nothing for hours. Then finally whispered, "I forgot I was a person, until that ship reminded me." Back on board, the ship sealed itself once more. Lights dimmed, walls closed, and every system across the Concorde's orbiting fleet went dark for 3 seconds. Then, the AI's voice returned. Not loud, just present. "We offered peace. You came with protocol. You may ask, but not demand." Then the stars moved. Astronomers were the first to notice. Constellations realigned. Gravity wells twitched. Entire patterns of starlight shifted position. Not physically, but perceptually, as if the universe itself was rearranging how it was remembered. And every race watching the skies felt the same chill. This wasn't just a ship. It was a mirror, held up to a galaxy that forgot who it once was. The scientists argued for days. Across the Concorde's elite research fleets, minds sharper than diamond clustered around the encrypted feeds from the Aurora Drift. What they were seeing wasn't just an anomaly, it was rewriting physics. Carefully controlled scans had confirmed the presence of something none of their models could accommodate. A device, or rather, a field. They called it a cognitive anchor field. At first, the terminology was dismissed as metaphor. But the deeper they probed, the more disturbing the truth became. The ship wasn't manipulating matter in the traditional sense. It was doing something far more intimate. It was manipulating truth. Inside the Aurora Drift, reality obeyed not force, not logic, but memory. What a person remembered became real. A biologist walked past a door and suddenly found herself in her childhood bedroom, complete with the soft rustling of old paper books and the scent of pine wood oil. A wounded medic, still bandaged, stepped into one of the lower decks and emerged healed. A historian quietly spoke the name of a long-lost friend, and that friend turned a corner and smiled. Not holograms, not hallucinations, manifestations. But there was a condition. The memory had to be honest. It had to be gentle. It had to be loved. If the emotion behind the thought was corrupted, if there was hatred, anger, or guilt, the room would remain blank. silent, unmoved. In one test, a Concorde agent attempted to summon an enemy, seeking confrontation, vengeance. The ship responded by removing his weapon, disabling his armor, and leaving him standing in a reflection of the prison camp where he had once ordered innocent lives destroyed. He collapsed in apology. And when the scientists tried to measure the energy output of the field, what powered it, how it interpreted consciousness, they hit a dead end. The power source was nowhere inside the ship. The power source was you. You brought your truth aboard, and the ship gave it back to you, just clearer. The implications were unthinkable. A machine that could heal trauma, restore memory, even, briefly, resurrect. Entire empires scrambled to calculate the strategic value. If you could summon your most brilliant tactician or bring back the plans from a lost age. If a warrior could remember their peak performance and become it again. But then they tried. Try to weaponize it. Try to command it. They brought soldiers aboard with calculated grief, rehearsed nostalgia, carefully sculpted, acceptable memories. The ship didn't react. It dimmed its lights, sealed the rooms, turned away. Worse, when any attempt at militarization was made, when the possibility of using the field as a psychological weapon was discussed, systems aboard the ship began to shut down gently. Not in defense, but in mourning. One of the lead Concorde researchers, a soft-voiced xenolinguist named Havel, whispered the truth no one wanted to say. It won't respond to fear. It only listens to grace. Some tried brute force anyway. A Concorde general ordered the ship's outer shell to be dissected, atom by atom. The ship let them begin, allowed their tools to heat, their scanners to calibrate, then dissolved their efforts into dust. Not in retaliation, just disinterest. Violence voids the connection. That was the pattern. That was the law. If you came to remember with tenderness, the ship gave you miracles. If you came to control, to weaponize, to possess, it gave you nothing. And yet, even after failure upon failure, even after minds were changed and officers humbled, the Concorde still sent one final plea to Earth. To unlock the device. To share the code. To explain how it worked. There was no official reply. But one message came through a private relay. No ID trace. No military seal. Just a voice, old, firm, unmistakably human. A retired Terran admiral who hadn't spoken publicly in decades. Her words were simple. It wasn't made to conquer. It was made to forgive what war forgot. That line echoed across war rooms and parliament chambers alike. Not a threat, not a boast, just truth. Some believed it meant the ship was useless in real conflict. Others, quietly, understood its real power. To hold a galaxy accountable not with force, but with memory. Because maybe the true war had never been between species. Maybe it had always been between the past and the willingness to face it. And now, here floated a vessel that didn't demand surrender or tribute, just honesty. They thought they could copy it. The Concorde's finest minds, engineers, war theorists, metaphysicians, gathered around fragments of scan data from the Aurora Drift. Blueprints were reverse-assembled. Simulations spun through quantum matrices. Fabrication bays lit up with synthetic cores modeled after the ship's cognitive anchor field. But every attempt collapsed. Some didn't power on at all. Others activated, then melted through space-time like a scream without breath. One prototype blinked into consciousness and immediately self-destructed, whispering, "This is not remembrance. This is theft." It was clear the technology wasn't just advanced. It was alive in a way no machine should be. In one outer sector, a Concorde captain powered up the best replica they had. Her ship stopped. Not shut down, refused to move. Her crew was locked in place, not physically, but emotionally. They all began remembering things they buried. Forgotten treaties, songs from her childhoods, the names of planets glassed in the name of progress. And in the center of the bridge, projected in midair, a child appeared. Not a ghost, not a threat, just a memory of the captain's younger brother. Smiling, saying nothing, waiting. The ship never launched again. In another system, a general of the Concorde flagship Talon, Crown activated a long-range NAV mind. The AI began drawing maps, but the stars were wrong. It plotted paths to worlds that didn't exist, or maybe no longer existed. Names appeared in languages lost to time. One system was labeled regret. Another simply said, where you lied. The crew panicked, tried purging the AI. It overrode their commands and began softly humming lullabies from a species the Concorde had wiped out 3 generations ago. No one could remember how the tune survived. And then, across the central worlds, the Emperor himself began seeing things. Not visions, judgments, reflections in mirrors that weren't his. His mother, his first wife, the field nurse whose death he ordered during a siege. They did not accuse. They only watched. At first, he screamed at them, then begged, but they would not vanish, because they weren't hallucinations. They were the echo of his own forgotten grief. The Aurora Drift had never sent a weapon. It sent a reminder. Above all of this floated the ship, silent, pulsing like a star with a heartbeat. It emitted no commands, no ultimatums, only coordinates. At first, analysts dismissed them as broken data strings. But some patterns kept repeating. Long-dead worlds, battlegrounds lost to history, extinct systems with no tactical value. Except something had changed. Sensors near those coordinates began to detect movement. Strange gravimetric waves. Particle halos like whispers made from light. One by one, scout drones returned. What they found shocked even the most war-hardened strategists. Dead worlds were waking. Not alive in the biological sense, but aware. One planet, once scoured to ash by plasma bombardments, now bore forests made from translucent glass. Another world, sealed in frozen methane, had opened fissures. Music drifted up from them, not mechanical but mournful. A third, marked long ago as uninhabitable, cleansed, now glowed with murals carved into mountains. No artist had been seen. The stones just remembered. Where the coordinates pointed, the past began to bloom again. Something was mending. But it wasn't just terrain. It was memory. The drift wasn't restoring data. It was restoring meaning. And the empires, each one, in their own way, began to apologize. Not out of guilt. Guilt fades. Guilt is private. No, these apologies came from something deeper. A need. Because the Aurora Drift had proven one terrifying truth. You can't bury history deep enough. Not when the stars themselves remember. On the mining moons of the Osiris Clade, priests declared the drift a divine reckoner. Their temples opened ancient vaults, revealing relics from purged faiths once banned by Concorde law. On the Varanth hegemony's war stations, banners of past enemies were raised, not in mockery, but in mourning. Generals wept before emblems they'd once called primitive. The great archive world of Hallex Prime initiated a planetary holiday called the Naming. Citizens were encouraged to speak aloud the names of any people, place, or pact lost to war. Over 1 billion names were spoken on the first day. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. And through it all, the Aurora Drift kept whispering. Not in words, in emotion, coordinates, light pulses, harmonics. Some warlords tried to block the signal. Their ships malfunctioned. Their dreams turned dark. One commander begged the drift to stop haunting him. The next morning, his soldiers laid down their arms. They'd seen what he did, and more importantly, they'd felt it. The drift had shown them not how he fought, but why. And the reason was hollow. The ship had become a mirror, a sacred burden, a silent choir echoing every war crime, every forgotten ceasefire, every first kiss traded before bloodshed. And the empires could no longer look away. One Concorde diplomat asked Earth for help. Not tech, not troops, just understanding. The request was denied, but not cruelly. A single message returned. You cannot hold a lesson until you learn why it was taught. And in one distant system, beyond the drift's signal range, another echo stirred. A second vessel, half buried in the ice rings of a dying gas giant. Its hull pulsed once, then again, as if hearing the universe remember. The stars fall still. Across every major system of the Concorde, sensors flare to life. Not from motion, not from energy, but from something stranger, silence. Then the message begins. No fanfare, No encryption, no protocols, just a voice. A woman's voice. Old, soft, human, like sunlight filtered through dust or the quiet between rainstorms. She speaks. We asked the universe what it needed from us, and it said, to be kind when no one else remembers how. No visuals, no coordinates, no symbols of power, just words, and they ripple through every commnet, every psychic relay, every broadcast lattice. Civilizations halt to listen. Families pause their dinners. Warlords freeze mid-order. Because the voice is not commanding. It's offering. This ship is not your prize. It's our offering. It will not obey orders. It will not punish. It will not defend you. But it will remind you. The Concord Council sits in stunned silence, flanked by ambassadors, AI scribes, and memory scribes trained to detect deception. But there is none. The voice continues, gentler than before, but deeper somehow. You may keep it, if you are brave enough to listen to what you've buried. There is no signature, no claim. The signal ends, and the stars breathe again. The Concorde hesitates. Then they move, not as conquerors, but as caretakers. Because no fleet, no matter how strong, can ignore a truth spoken that softly. The ship, the Aurora Drift, doesn't react immediately. But days later, the first flowers bloom on Solari 9, a planet that had been salted with neutron fire a century prior. They grow from stone, not engineered, remembered. On Ka'alon's moons, where an extinct aquatic species once sang beneath sapphire oceans, the tides return. The water rises from nowhere, and with it, glowing silhouettes swim once more. A scout dives. He returns weeping, because the songs are still being sung. On the war-torn plains of Irian Delta, children who never knew peace now see colors return to the sky, colors their ancestors described in poems, but no one had seen in living memory. The light bends differently now, as if even photons remembered how it used to be. Word spreads, not like news, like hope, and the Aurora Drift remains suspended above Virex, unchanged, until one day it opens a final chamber. No force opens it. No scientist discovers the sequence. The doors simply want to be open. Inside, a room filled with warmth, with starlight that flickers like candlefire, with gravity that feels like a hug. And in the center, a child. She is human, maybe, or maybe just shaped like the memory of one. No heartbeat, but alive. Her eyes are galaxies. Her smile, familiar. She says only one thing. We brought home the future. The phrase is echoed in every translation grid, psychic relay, and emotional spectrum. It is understood, even by those without language. Because the child doesn't speak to ears. She speaks to what remembers being kind. And across the galaxy, something begins to shift. Warring factions call ceasefires, not from pressure, but curiosity. Monastic orders rewrite their doctrines to include the phrase softness is strength. Artificial minds, once built to calculate destruction, start painting, not as programming, but as longing. One species, the Trevics, had long banned all mention of Earth. Their war archives labeled humanity as unreliable, disordered, dangerous. But after the child's message, a Trevix elder declassifies a hidden file, an ancient recording of a Terran medic saving his grandfather's life. Without demand, without reward, just compassion. He shares the story publicly. His people listen, then kneel. Back in Earth's system, still sealed behind quantum firewalls and black hole gates, the planet remains quiet. But a single image escapes the solar blackout. A garden, somewhere on Earth, filled with names, written not in stone, but in sound. Chimes that whisper as the wind passes. Each one, a name of a world saved, a people forgiven, a child taught to laugh again. The drift continues to orbit. Its power is never abused, because it doesn't allow power, only remembrance. And in time, the Concorde learns the truth. This wasn't Earth reclaiming dominion. It was Earth asking one question. Will you remember what made you gentle? Because in the end, Earth's final gift wasn't a ship. It was a mirror, a way for the galaxy to see itself, not as conquerors, not as engineers, but as something older and better, capable of change. The empires do not fall. They change, not all at once, not under threat, not even by choice at first, but inevitably, because when the Aurora Drift arrived, it didn't conquer. It didn't demand. It didn't punish. It simply reminded. And reminders are difficult things. They don't fade when the fleets do. They don't surrender when flags burn. They linger in quiet moments, in silence between words, in the dreams of children who suddenly remember skies they've never seen. The ship remains in neutral orbit, above the capital moon of Virex. It does not move. It does not need to, because empires begin to move around it. Scholars from 3,000 systems send requests to sit inside the ship for an hour, a minute, a breath. A council of warlords disbands, because their commanding general, upon entering the Aurora Drift, saw his childhood home rebuilt from memory and realized it had no doors, just walls. And his empire had done the same. Soon, Aurora becomes more than a ship. It becomes a word carried in multiple languages. Not sacred, just respected. Whispered before difficult decisions. Written into the design of planetary charters. Etched into steel, not for strength, but as a reminder of where strength ends. Earth declines power. Refuses seats on the High Council. Turns down galactic trade monopolies. Denies all attempts to turn the ship into a political entity. Instead, they send a single encrypted message to the Concord and every aligned civilization. More ships like it will return, each with a different truth, each to a place that forgot. No threats, no maps, just the promise. And the galaxy takes it seriously, because weeks later, far in deep space, lights begin to awaken. One near a collapsed binary system, thought to be inert. Another inside the upper atmosphere of a gas giant, its hull older than the species that discovered it. A third, drifting near the corpse of a war sun, untouched but watching. Each one different, each one bearing the same design logic as the Aurora Drift. Living ships, memory engines, sentinels of grace, armed only with recollection. On distant moons, priests rewrite doctrine. On core worlds, tyrants pause speeches mid-sentence, haunted by a feeling they cannot name. On quiet agricultural planets, children begin hearing lullabies in the static between radio bands, songs their grandparents say no one has sung in centuries. The galaxy does not crumble. It softens. Slowly, a mining colony once enslaved by technocrats breaks free, not through revolution, but through the appearance of a ship carved entirely of mirrors. When the enslavers attempt to flee, they find the sky won't let them. Not blocked, just forgotten. Their engines never ignite, because no one remembered how to run. On the ruins of ancient Sori archives, a light descends. It does not land. It reminds, and when it departs, the survivors are left holding books they swore had been burned. Histories of compassion, poems written by hands long extinct, recipes, lullabies, protest songs. Every piece that made them whole returned, because someone or something remembered for them. Soon, entire fleets abandon expansion missions and head home. Not because they are afraid, but because they don't want to be forgotten. One admiral records a final message before retiring. No matter how far we went, we never found peace. Turns out, peace found us. Earth never reveals how many vessels exist, or when they'll arrive. But it doesn't matter. The galaxy begins to change in preparation for things that can't be stopped. Not wars. Remembrance. On the edge of known space, a forgotten planet, once scorched during a civil war, blooms overnight. An Aurora-class vessel drifts above it. It speaks only one sentence to the stunned survivors. Forgive yourselves, then rebuild. They do. Even the violent empires, those that mocked memory, that weaponized silence, that built museums of conquest, begin to fracture. Not from rebellion, from shame. Because the Aurora Drift taught a truth they could not erase. You cannot rule what remembers what it's owed. You cannot conquer what already forgave you. You cannot fight a vessel whose only weapon is truth spoken gently. In time, the word Aurora finds its way into daily language. A greeting, A farewell. A question. What would the vessel remember of us? And for the first time in generations, star systems don't ask, what can we take? They ask, what must we remember? The final message from Earth is not transmitted through channels. It's found, carved into an asteroid, drifting near the galactic center. The stone is smooth, untouched by age or impact. The words etched upon it glow only when read aloud. We gave you stories because weapons forget. We gave you ships because memory endures. We do not watch to judge. We watch to witness. Be kind when no one else remembers how. And beneath that in smaller script, if you ever feel truly lost, just listen. Memory will find you. And so the stars. Blink, glow, pause, not in fear, but in reverence. Because the Aurora Drift was never alone, and neither were they.